Okay, now, good afternoon, everybody. You just got my intro, so you know who I am. Uh, this topic is a very hot topic, and I'm very passionate about it because, as you can see, that I am part of the diversity, and that is what this whole thing is all about. Now, the topic, if you see, will start with the word diversity, and my first question is what does diversity mean to you? When the word diversity comes in the social context, what do you think of first?
Anyone and everyone working together. We have that from Jackie. I also have from Carrie a variety of viewpoints and experiences. From Cindy, disabled students.
Mhm. Okay. Let me then,
Belonging or community. We still have a few coming in from
okay.
Megan.
Okay. See, as you can see, the title is still not complete, right? I did that deliberately. Okay. Okay. So this is what diversity would look like in some social setting. Okay. This is not in totality. As somebody said, disability, it could be generational, and then we'll talk about those things. The other thing is embrace it, which is DEI. And embrace signifies what to you? The word embrace, what does that signify to you? Although I have a typo, I'm sorry, should have been E, not a T, but the word embrace, what does that signify to you?
All right. We have it means to appreciate it and work with it, to accept it, and to be able to support it.
Okay, that's good. Face it, well, we all know what face it would mean, right? So we don't need to go into what face it would be. But the next slide will talk more about what embrace means. Now, what does this picture, which is worth 1,000 words or maybe 1,000,000 words, what is this picture telling you at this point of time? It's an embrace, but what does what does it tell you? This picture, but in particular,
that they care about each other, love and care,
and
support,
and
understanding,
and good. Keep going, because this is important.
Holding on.
This is important to understand diversity, DEI, to understand DEI.
Respect.
Now, you see, an embrace is a universally acceptable means of showing affection and love. Isn't it true? It is universal. I mean, it cuts across all ages, ethnicities, cultures, religions, status, and it comes in naturally. That's the best part of it. It's in the human DNA that when you really want to be close to somebody, you embrace. A very common thing here in the United States is, when you really get friendly with somebody, you say, even if you don't know the person, hey, give me a hug. Okay. Now, that's an embrace. And that is natural. Now, embracing is what we all define. So when we go further into the DEI, that is why I'm using the word embrace it. I'm not saying, apply DEI. I'm not saying use DEI. I'm saying embrace it. So keep in mind the definition of embrace that we just talked about and what this picture reflects. Well, this is, obviously, if you have to face DEI, you don't like it. You are one of those who think that DEI is not a good thing. I mean, sorry, diversity is not a good thing. Then you have to face the music. This is what really happens when you do that. Okay, now we all know that DEI means diversity, equity, and inclusion. We all know that. However, why is the equity in red? Do you think equity has a significance in this acronym of DEI? Any guesses? What would equity mean in terms of DEI?
Equal compensation. Without equity, you can't maintain inclusion or diversity. Fairness, treating people as equals despite differences.
Okay, so we need to be very careful. That means there are people who are equating equal with equity. Now, equity and equal are two different things. We have to keep this in mind. And as we go further, I mean, you'll understand what I talk about. Being equal is not the same thing as equity. So that's one thing. But those who said that equity is something that goes into inclusion after with diversity, I think that they got the whole thing. They really got the DEI concept right. Now, equity is having empathy, which means wearing the other person's shoes and seeing if it pinches or if it hurts. It might, it might be dull or whatever. So that is one thing about equity. Equity is also being fair. Now, being fair does not mean equal. Being fair to somebody, and the example is, very, very popular example given to define equal and equity is, or being fair, is that there's a fence and you have a tall guy, 6 feet 5, and then a short guy, 4 foot, and they both want to see the match taking place behind the fence, and you give them both the same size box, you know, where the tall guy can, look over the thing, but the short guy can still not look over because of the size of the box. But equity would be that you give the shorter guy a higher box so that he or she can, look over the fence and see the game.
Someone put in the chat here, equity is more about providing resources needed to succeed, which is different for all of us.
Absolutely. That is the perfect definition of equity. That is why equity is not the same thing as a equal. Equal can be equity in some cases where everybody starts at the same starting line. At that point, equity could be equal to equal. But in most cases, equity is what this definition came. It was a beautiful definition, and I must laud the person who gave that. Now, then equity also means being impartial. Because obviously, you have to have no biases. If you want to be fair, if you want to have empathy, you have to be impartial. Okay. Now, what is the difference between the first statement and the second statement? And there's an obvious difference, right? And the difference is that the equity has been replaced by and. Now, the original concept of DEI was started a long time back. The replacement of the equity with and is a more recent phenomenon. When I say recent, I don't mean a couple of years. When I say recent, I mean as compared to the original DEI. Now, can anybody tell me as to just one sentence why was the equity replaced by and?
So we have a request to repeat the question.
Can anybody tell me as to why the equity in the DEI, why was that converted into D and I? Why did they take out the E out of it? As you can see on the screen, it was DEI, but now most people, term it as D and I. And they tend to say that equity is now included in the inclusion. So what I'm saying is, why do you think this happened?
Someone has said you can include diverse populations, but it doesn't matter if folks can't access the information.
No, what I'm saying is, why was equity replaced by and? So now DEI has become D and I. What do you think made the entities do this?
Any other thoughts?
Okay, so should I go on or anybody?
Is the equity assumed in all interactions? People have a hard time with equity, diversity, and inclusion are easier to fulfill. And is a poor substitute for equity because equity is better.
Good. Okay. Now, as you see, just as somebody defined beautifully, one of the participants defined equity beautifully, that is the essence of equity. And the word and is just and, right? Okay. So equity is more binding. You see, equity is more definitive. Equity has boundaries. Equity is difficult to implement unless you seriously subscribe to it. So, what has happened is that because people found difficult to implement equity, they included that as part of inclusion because inclusion is broad, inclusion is flexible, inclusion can be superficial, inclusion can be modified to suit yourself. And here's an example. A person got permission from the county to build a theater on a very prized land at very low cost. He bought the land because of diversity and inclusion. Now, they didn't use the word equity, diversity and inclusion. They said it will be an all-inclusive theater. Then but when the theater was built, their definition of inclusion was that the tickets were so priced from $5 to $25 that almost anybody in that region or in that area could buy a ticket. For them, that was equity, and that's it. I'm sorry, that was inclusion. So everything else in the theater did not show any aspect of equity. Neither the food that was being served, nor the way theater was designed, nor the way they had the elevators or the staircases or the bathrooms, whatever. Nothing else was inclusive, just the ticket. So for them, that one aspect of having the tickets at a low price, affordable for everybody, was inclusion. So that is how people can get away if they don't use the word equity and use the word and with it. So let's go to the next slide. Now, what do you see on the top right corner? What does that picture mean to you?
An eye.
Well, not really. It is an eye, but what is the eye? What
An
is the
eye
eye?
made up of lots of smaller pictures, an awesome collage of individual pictures that combines to make
Well,
up an eye.
awesome. The person who said awesome collage of individual pictures got it right, hit right on the nail. I hope that's the same person who gave the definition of equity. This is what you call the mosaic integration theory of diversity. Now, mosaic is something good, which means it allows people to have their individuality. When you have a collage, as somebody said, of people, it allows individuality. It allows them to bind together as one, though being different. It celebrates differences, and it creates a strong bond by by joining together and doing things for the same common cause. Can anyone think of a country that has used this mosaic integration model for its diverse immigration policies and for its diverse diversity or DEI? Can somebody think of a country?
Can't recall. Anything? I think this requires some knowledge of immigration policy.
Not really. No, no, no,
Australia.
not really. No, I'm not just immigration. I'm just talking about the social fabric and the how
Okay.
the society.
We
Okay,
have a guess of Australia.
uh, no. Well, the answer is Canada.
Canada.
Canada is one country that used the mosaic theory right from day one. They made sure that everybody who was different stayed different, but but they would gel around a cause of national importance and loyalty and everything, but they would still retain their identity, their culture, their religion, their whatever, and be as respected as such as an individual person with a difference. That is Canada. Okay, now what does the right bottom picture talk to you? Any answers?
Melting pot.
Yeah, good. So that everybody knows. Now, so this is what you call the melting pot theory. Any country that comes to your mind that is a pioneer of melting pot and has always taken pride in being the melting pot?
The United States.
Right. Now, but let me tell you this. This was the worst thing that the USA could have done for diversity, the melting pot theory. And I'll tell you why. You see, melting pot means that all the different people come into a pot and they come out as the same, which is like the dominant culture or like the majority culture or majority of whatever is going on. That kills all the benefits of diversity. Now, but don't get me wrong, melting pot theory is good in certain things, and I'll tell you what. For example, in the armed forces, the soldiers need to be part of a melting pot, otherwise things won't work. If they come from different background, different thoughts, they get into the melting pot. When they come out, they are all one. Same thing with the first responders, because when it comes to saving lives, your individual thoughts don't matter. What matters is the procedure. You have to go by the procedure. However, even in these departments, when you get to the top, for example, when the president is holding a National Security Council meeting, does the president want that all the army chiefs and the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Interior and the Marine boss, should they all be part of the melting pot? No. At that point, they want a mosaic. At that point, they want people with different views, different theories to come up and say, hey, this is what I think, this is what I think. So the melting pot theory goes out of the door at that level. See, this is what I was trying to explain. When I was young, maybe, I don't know, 13, 14 years old, I read in Reader Digest one quote, and that quote is stuck in my mind right here. If everybody agrees on something in a room, you can be sure that there is only one person doing the thinking. And that's a fact. Okay, now there are different types of diversities, and we'll just go very quickly through them because then we have more other important things that we'll need to go into. There's something called an internal diversity, which is diversity that is based on who you are. Things diversity that you cannot change. Things that you cannot change. For example, your race, your ethnicity, age, and then and the origin, gender, genes. Well, I said gender because when I was growing up, the gender you were born in was the gender you would live with. But in today's technology, things have changed. So gender could be in internal diversity. Gender could not be in internal diversity, depending on where you stand on the on the issue. And when it comes to age, within age, we've got diversity where people depending on when you were born. So we'll sort of look at that separately. Now, the second one is external diversity, which is you're not born with it, but it is developed. It can be changed, it can be improved, or it can be removed, like education, appearances, citizenship, religion, familial status, and socioeconomic status. Then, and then there is organizational diversity, which is the most common one, which is also the functional diversity, also called the skills diversity, that people all understand: job function, management status, seniority, pay type, job type, union affiliation, and the place you work in. The fourth is the worldview diversity, which is created by 1, 2, and 3. That is part of 1, 2, and 3. And it thinks like political beliefs and moral compass and epistemology and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, but there's another way of looking at these diversities, and that is this model, which is given by Lee and Anita. I personally like the model. The only difference between this and the 4 diversities we talked about is that they have taken out the worldview diversity, and instead of that, they have put in a personality circle at the core of the diversity circle they have created. Now, personality in this particular model means openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, which is instability, instability, anxiety, aggression, and all that. Now, personally, I like the model, but the definition of personality I don't really agree with it here, because personality is much more than all this, and is also sometimes part of the genes. sometimes part of the external dimensions that are there. So, but this is a view they have, and it's a very popular view. It all depends upon how you want to use it, if you want to use it. Now, we come to the point of why DEI. Now, if you look at the statement, being around people who are different from us makes us more creative, more diligent, and hardworking. Now, focus on the first three words, being around people. So, I'm not talking about the people, diverse people themselves, the people who are, let's say, different from the majority or from the dominant culture. I'm talking about the dominant culture or the people in the majority. When they are around diverse people, it makes them more creative, more diligent, and harder working. Now, that is something that we need to look at. So, this is a double advantage. The diverse people have their own advantages, that as we'll see as we move along, but they're just being there. These people create an atmosphere where the other people who are the majority or the dominant culture, they are forced to be more creative. They expect a different viewpoint, so they are more sort of ready to sort of listen and then respond, and it makes them work harder. And then then that creates synergy and all that sort of thing. Uh, and in the next slide, I will give you my own example. Being in USA for the last 22 years, I originally come from Pakistan, basically. So I mean, I've been here like 23 years. So I'll give you some examples of how this plays out. You know, and now when you don't have a DEI policy, the social diversity in a group can cause discomfort, rougher interactions, a lack of trust, greater perceived interpersonal conflict, lower communication, less cohesion, more concern about disrespect, and other problems. So, while on the positive side, I made the first statement, on the negative side, if you do not have DEI policies, if you do not have people who understand diversity and accept it, then this is what can happen. However, we also need to understand that people who are different from one another in race, gender, and other dimensions bring unique information experiences, which is called the information diversity. And that is what I've talked about in the first opening of the slide, that this is what makes the other people who are different in the room to be creative, diligent, and hardworking. And then take a simple example. A male and a female engineer might have perspective as different from each other as an engineer and a physicist. I mean, it could be totally different. See, you see on the bottom picture of a man and a woman, back to back, with their hands folded. Now, this is the reverse of the picture where you had, two women embracing each other, facing each other, and, with their hands around each other. Now, this is a picture that shows the difference between a man and a woman both smiling but looking at things in a totally different perspective. And this picture brought a very old couplet, which is a funny thing when I was young, to my mind. And it said like, and this is sort of tell you exactly how men and women are different. Back to back, they faced each other, drew their swords, and shot each other. Now, men and women, people who are married or who have relationships, know how different they each of them thinks while looking at the same thing. What seems so normal to a man may seem abnormal to a woman. What seems dirty to a man may look like okay to a woman. Normally, it's the other way around. So, I mean, everything a man and a woman looks at, that gender perspective creates a lot of differences.
Someone also added in the chat, to be inclusive, what different perspective might a non-binary person add?
Again, could you repeat the question?
So this person in the chat is saying to be more inclusive of genders beyond just men and women, to consider what different perspective a person who identifies as non-binary.
Yeah, you see, gender is just one aspect of being inclusive. But inclusiveness means, that embrace part of it, that is inclusiveness. You are accepting the person as a whole. You're not picking and choosing. You don't like this, you like that. The person is acceptable as a package. And the package has the good and the bad. And we'll see further, the good and the bad and the ugly as you'll see. But gender is just one part of it. And it is an important part of it, but not the most important part of it. The most important part is what we call cultural diversity, which impacts people differently, because you see, gender is now a more of an acceptable thing. It has been here for a long time. People have understood it. People have taken cognizance of it. Even yet, the women in the country are not treated equally. Even their pay scales are different. They're lower for women than men. So there goes the inclusiveness. But when you accept a person as a whole, that is part of inclusiveness. Now, I said I'll give you my personal example of what really happened. And see, I am part of the generational diversity, being born in 1949. So that means I'm more of a traditionalist. And as you know, that the generational diversity is, traditionalist, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, which is Gen Y, Gen Z, and now they call the Alpha generation. All these different generations have their different characteristics, but I am the traditional one. And then there's social diversity, coming from Pakistan as a Muslim, you know, with a specific culture, specific language, specific way of doing things, specific way of understanding things, the way we've grown up, the way we sort of, the country where I grew, Pakistan, the way I had to interact, my fight for survival, all these things make you a different person. You think differently because you have gone through everything which is so different from a different culture. And so I'll give you two examples, one good and one bad. Robert Morris University. I joined this university in 2017 for my PhD. Now, this was a 47-year break. My last degree in MBA was in 1973. That was a long time back from Pakistan. Anyway, I decided to go back to school. I joined the university, and that, I was the only diverse person in a group of 18 students. And that was helpful. And I'll tell you how. Because my thinking was totally different. I would look at things totally from a different point of view. I mean, and my class, my group, they were surprised as to how can I think like that. But that was the way I was raised. That was the way my mind would work. But the best thing was that the professor, the first lecture, when I had been through with all the questions I had asked her, before she left, she said, "It seems you have a monopoly on all the good questions." Now that, and then my colleagues came up to me and they said, how can you even think of that particular angle? I said, I don't have to think about it. That comes to me naturally. Now, this is what I was talking about before, that people with unique experiences and informational diversity, when they come in, it forces other people around them to think better, to think clearer. And this is what happened in the class. The director of the program told the dean that the whole discourse has shifted positively at a higher level because of this one person asking questions which are totally different from what the others asked for. So people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different ways of living tend to think differently. And that is the beauty of diversity. On the other angle, I was working for a company called Global Investments, and they trained me 100 hours of training as a consultant to go out and talk to people, help them solve problems. I went to smaller mom and pop businesses, and in most cases, when I entered the room, 9 out of 10, the person in front of me did not expect to see me coming in as a consultant. And within 5 minutes, the meeting was over in 9 cases. Only one case, there was some, 2 hours of discussion and all that. Now, these were the people who were not willing to accept diversity. They thought diversity was a problem. They thought that this person coming in cannot tell me how to run my business. What does he know? What would he know? He comes from from a South Asian country or whatever. So so this is what happens. So what happened? I mean, probably they lost a good opportunity of getting some good advice, but that's okay. So this is what diversity can do to you. Okay, how many of you have seen this movie, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly? I guess nobody, because this was in 1966, right? Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef, and Eli Wallach. Anybody? No?
So one person said I have, but not in theaters. Another person said they have not seen it.
Okay,
I
fine.
have not seen it.
Yeah, that's okay. But I want to use The Good, the Bad, the Ugly for something. I just use this as a lighter, for a lighter moment. Last 5 years, 12% of S&P 500 hired CDOs. Would you say this is good or bad or ugly?
What is a CDO?
Oh, a Chief Diversity Officer. 50% of these were newly created positions. Okay, I mean, that's okay. I would have hoped that their percentage was less because the position should have been there, but still you can say it's good or it's bad, but you can argue about it.
We have medium in the chat.
Okay. How about this? Only 3% reported to the CEO. 5 seconds.
Bad.
Ugly.
Ugly.
This does not work. Take my word, this does not work.
Who do they report to? If they don't report to the CEO, good question.
84% reported to the various levels in HR. Bad. HR cannot control CDO because HR has its own way of doing things. HR has different things to do. This is a very focused approach, and only a CEO is able to sort of get, because this needs decisions that are much beyond the capacity of HR. This needs difficult decisions that only the CEO can implement. So that is why only the CEO can, the CDO should only report to the CEO. And only 30% of these 84% reported to the Chief Human Resource Officer, which is better than reporting to somebody at the HR, but still not good enough. The CDOs must always report to the CEO because of the difficult decisions that need to be implemented, which will not be liked by many people, but they have to be implemented. And therefore, CEO is the only person who can do that. Okay. Now, we'll talk about what happens when DEI is implemented properly. Okay. Research has shown that the companies with proper DEI policies are 20% more profitable than the companies that did not have DEI policies or did not think about DEI. Proper DEI policies reduces workplace harassment, and obviously because harassment comes in when there is friction between different people. It could be gender, it could be age, it could be culture, it could be religion, it could be social. If you don't accept it, there is harassment. And then, business lose 7.6 million per year. I'm sure it's much more than this, but this is a figure I was able to get. Diverse teams make better decisions 87% of the time. This was tried in projects, various projects. Hundreds of projects were done. These were tried out there, and it was found that 87% of the time, the teams that were diverse had much better decision. Obviously, for obvious reason, because there was more input, there was different input, there was discussion on the input, and the people of different people were waiting to hear differently from different aspects. So you were able to see. It's like it's like a prism. We are looking from the three sides instead of looking at from only one side. So this is what helps do that. Okay, now we go to the steps to implement DEI policy. Now, this is important, and I think this is probably my second last slide. Uh, Heightened awareness at the CEO and the C-suite levels. This is the first thing. And we saw the heightened awareness is not there because if it was there, it would not have been 3% people reporting the CEO. It would have been 100% CDOs reporting the CEO. That means sure that the CEO's heightened awareness is missing. Okay. So what is next? DEI need to be in the same sequence as in the acronym. We talked before. E is important. E is critical. Without E, you cannot have I. Without equity, you cannot really be inclusive. Just think of a scenario. How can you be inclusive if you're not using equity? I mean, as simple as that. Anybody can understand this one simple thing. Unless you don't want to understand, that's fine. But it's simple. Equity has to come before inclusion. Therefore, the DEI acronym has to be the way it is. E should not be replaced by and that we talked about it. Because, by replacing E with and, all you're doing is you're making an excuse and saying, hey, you know what? E is part of I. But, let's not kid ourselves. It's not. By adding E into I, you are diluting the equity and making it into something different, which is not equity. So the whole notion of equity goes out of the door. So E should not be replaced by an and. Hiring the right CDO, now that is what is important. Chief Diversity Officer. How do you know the person you are hiring is the right person for being a Chief Diversity Officer? What I call this person IIP, which is intrinsically inclusive person. The person who is intrinsically inclusive is the person who should be the CDO. And what does that mean? That means that the person is in himself or herself inclusive. It's not like a job trying to be inclusive. It's not part of the job. It's who the person is. The person is not trying to be what other people want the person to be. The person is who the person is actually is. So that is important. Your CDO has to be intrinsically inclusive person. The only way, and then that person can create what we call a truly inclusive culture, TIC. And a truly inclusive culture is what you need. It can only come with somebody who is intrinsically inclusive, not a 9 to 5 job. As I said before, CDOs to report to CEO, not the HR. As I told you before and I explained before, because the difficult decisions need to be implemented by the CEO, HR will not be able to implement the difficult decisions. Only the CEO can push them down the throat and make sure that those decisions are taken. DEI is the state of mind. See, we have all heard quality is here. It's a state of mind. Quality is not in papers. Quality is not in the test you do. Quality is not in the report. Similarly, DEI is here. It's your thought. It's your intrinsic personality. It is what you believe in. It does not mean that it is not forms, systems, procedures, papers, meetings. It's not all that. It's here. So it's a state of mind. So we need people to change their state of mind to implement DEI. And that means it is not like a one-off thing. It's not like having a training or a meeting or a conference. It's mentorship, learning, self-assessments, reflections, self-reflection on a continuous basis. That is important. The reason that you cannot escape from diversity and the expansion I was talking about is here. And I'll tell you, it is simple high school mathematics. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not trying to point out something. I'm not trying to sort of, talk about, I don't know how to say it, but I want the dominant majority, the dominant group, the dominant culture in this country to realize that they are the reason of the diversity expansion. And here I'll tell you how. Research has shown that cultural ethnic group survival needs 2.5 children per family. That is the minimum for a culture to survive forever. Anything less than that will have the culture go down on a sliding scale. You want to have less children? No problem. Any groups that want to have less children? No problem. But they're looking at their culture and their ethnic group declining. And here is how. In USA and also globally, gender ratio of birth is 102 boys to 100 girls. So if there are 202 children born, 102 will be boys and 100 will be girls. This is a data which has gone for ages, and it is not only just USA. Globally, nature has sort of programmed the whole thing in such a way. Okay, so here's where the problem starts. In 2022, USA had only 1.5 children per family, and this is reducing every year. So now let's start the calculation. 100 mothers will give birth to 150 children based on 1.5. Okay. Out of these, based on the ratio I showed you above, only 73 will be girls. This is the one generation, 100 becomes 73. Second generation, these 73 mothers will give birth to 109 children. Out of these, 53 will be girls. So now that 100 has become 53 in 2 generations. These 53 mothers will give birth to 79 children, out of which only 38 will be girls. So in the third generation, 100 has become 38. So now you can imagine with the number of children per family declining, even going below. This example I have taken is based on 1.5 children per family. Imagine if this became one child per family. What would happen to this 100 becoming 38 would become, maybe 20, 25, or maybe 20. So all what we are doing is that particular ethnic group or that cultural dominant group is reducing the pool of mothers who will procreate and be able to give this nation the children that the nation needs. And this is the diversity expansion. This is why, because the children have to be either born locally here at the rate of 2.5 per family. If they are not, there will be a vacuum of manpower, and that vacuum has to be filled from people coming from outside. And people who come from outside are mostly what we call diverse people. And that is the expansion that will keep on going. If the dominant culture believes that they need to reverse this, they need to get back to having 2.5 children per family, which at one point was the norm. But it is no more today. Even China had to stop, it had the policy of no child for a long time, but now they have found a shortage of people. So they have come back and said, for God's sake, have children. Japan has now the same problem. At zero growth, they're saying, for God's sake, have children. But these countries have an issue where diversity cannot take place because of too much of difference in language and culture. America, on the other hand, or Europe, in fact, America, because of the English speaking country and being a country where people from all countries have come in or a country that was based on immigration, primarily, basically. So this becomes a natural ground for people to come in and try and live here. So that is why the diversity expansion is a reality. Embrace it or face it.